Thanks everyone for being here. My name is Rohan Patel. I work here at the White House Council on Environmental Quality, and we really could not be more excited about today's event, sports and sustainability. As you all know, President Obama is a huge sports fan and has made the clean energy economy a centerpiece of his administration. So today's event, we feel, is quite fitting. Our panels today will feature leaders of the sports leagues, stadium operators, stadium managers, and companies who have partnered with the leagues to innovate the supply chain. So to get this event started, I'd like to introduce John Carson, the President's Director of Public Engagement. John is an environmental engineer by training and is really the driver behind these events at the White House. He's been a mentor to me and many of our staff here at the White House, and thank you for being here, John.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the White House. Let me be the first of a long list of folks who are going to thank you for what you're doing across the country to green sports. And I'm here to start out the day with an ask of all of you. We're going to have a fantastic day. You're going to hear from all sorts. You're going to hear all sorts of concrete, great stories of change that's happening from stadiums to racetracks to Little League baseball fields across the country today. You're going to hear from administration officials and a chance for a back and forth. But my ask of all of you is to help us tell what you hear today. Help us blog about it, tweet about it. If you grab 3 people in the grocery store this weekend and tell them the story of being here at the White House today, tell them the story of what you learned. We're going to be using the hashtag green sports. If you don't know what a hashtag is, ask someone next to you. They'll tell you. And help us get this story out. I ask you to do that for 2 reasons. First, you are going to hear concrete ideas, best practices that you can share with the circles that you work in. You're going to hear about administration programs that maybe could be partners to take what you're doing to the next level. But the second reason I ask you to share this story is because what we see as we hold events like this here at the White House, what we learn is that Americans are inspired to take action, not by theories, not by ideas, but by concrete examples of others who are making change. When people find out what's going on in that stadium in their backyard, they're going to be inspired to green their local school. They're going to be inspired to think, maybe I could have a career in this field as well. And so please help us get this story told. And speaking of inspiring, the other thing I'm here to do today is to introduce our keynote speaker and our administration official who's really going to kick today off. I think my personal favorite member of the President's cabinet and someone who understands at her core what all of you are proving across this country, that we don't face a choice between our environment and jobs. She understands and is putting into practice administration policies across this country that show what you are proving, that cleaning our environment helps us create a strong economy as well. So with that, I'd like to introduce the Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, Lisa Jackson.
You can feel the energy in this room. I come to lots of outreach events. My dear friend John Carson does an amazing job running the President's outreach here in the White House and brings in all kinds of groups. And there's just a real energy and excitement this morning. And I think it's on the part of those of us who are here to meet with you, and I hope you feel it as well. This is an amazing room. It's an amazing time to be here, but the excitement is really coming because of what you're doing on the ground, and I want to thank you. I want to thank you first and foremost for joining us. I know that it's not only the folks who are here in this room, but the folks who are watching us online and will be watching us in the future. It is great to join you here and to join my administration colleagues in welcoming you to the White House. We are very excited to have you here. We're hosting this forum to bring together a targeted group of people who have the opportunity, as you already know, to make enormous amounts of change. Talking about sports and sustainability together gives us a new and very interesting way to talk about the challenges that every household, every business, every school, every house of worship faces. Challenges like energy efficiency, challenges like wanting to recycle, but wanting to know it can be done without becoming an all-consuming task. Challenges like conserving water, and of course the benefits that go along with all those things, which are cost savings. Our sports venues across our nation are like tiny cities that come to life for hours at a time. I've had the privilege of going backstage, I guess you would call it, at some of the stadiums, most recently in Seattle, right before a Mariners game, which I didn't stay for, by the way, and where they pitched a no-hitter. How does that so I've seen what happens, though, and it's really quite amazing. It's everything a mayor might have to deal with, but it's compressed into a smaller space, lots of people. So it's everything from water to energy to dealing with the waste and doing it in a way that also takes care of our communities, the communities around those venues. You have disposal needs, you have water supply needs, you have power needs, everything from turning on the stadium lights, of course, but also doing the laundry after the game is over. In some cases, the sports venues end up taking over entire cities. We can see that coming, obviously. It's a pretty auspicious time with what's going to happen in London next week, or in the case of Rio de Janeiro, which is getting ready for two big events, the 2014 World Cup and the 2016 Olympic Games. And they're undertaking extraordinary efforts on their own to lead the world in sustainability around the events that those games and opportunities represent. So by coming together at the White House, we're taking another step in a movement. This is a movement that I've been happy to watch gain momentum and begin to take hold all across our country. I've been very excited in recent years to see how the sports world has come to understand the importance and the benefits of innovative and cost-effective sustainable practices. And I've been really pleased to see how many organizations are coming forward, expressing their own interest in greener ways of doing business that will protect health and clean up the environment. Now, I'm proud to say that this is one of those occasions where we are able to watch from the sidelines, but that's not all we're going to do at the EPA. EPA has been an active participant in your efforts. We recently signed a memorandum of understanding with NASCAR to help them green the sport, to help them use products at their events that meet EPA's design for the environment standards, and to find creative avenues for raising environmental awareness at events. We're proud to have 5 members of the sports world as green power partners, including the Philadelphia Eagles, the Phillies, and the National Hockey League. We've had the chance to work with the Green Sports Alliance, a group that grew by nearly 700% in its first year, 700% growth in 1 year, to facilitate the use of Energy Star and expand energy efficiency generally amongst people who come to events. In 2011, the Stadium Managers Association held an Energy Bowl, one of the first energy efficiency competitions led by any sports association. The Energy Bowl included 20 participants from Major League Baseball and the NFL who worked to be as efficient as possible. The competition ended up saving enough electricity to light almost 7,500 homes annually. Think about that. In one event, one competition, one moment of focusing on what we can all do together voluntarily. And that same competition meant reducing greenhouse gas emissions equivalent to those generated from nearly 2,000 cars per year. The cost savings they experienced topped $1 million. Last but not least, EPA has built some great working partnerships with teams and their venues to increase recycling and reduce trash that ends up in landfills, to donate safe, unused food to shelters, to increase things like composting of organic materials. These are the kinds of initiatives that show professional sports world and people who love it that taking steps to save energy, cut waste, and clean up pollution is not just good for our health. It's also good for our bottom line. What's probably the best news is that the message reaches well beyond the fields or the courts or the stadiums. The love of sports is something millions of Americans share. I know it certainly that includes our first fan, President Obama. Oftentimes, our games and our teams are the only things you can get people inside the Beltway to focus on together outside of government and politics. I come to you today as an environmental advocate and a sports lover. I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana, 4 years old when the Saints came marching in. And that's the team I've been rooting for all my life, through good times and bad. I know just how important, but we just signed him, so we're good. I know just how important the teams can be to the fans that love them, and I know how influential they can be by raising awareness and leading the way on the important issues that affect us all. That covers everything from recycling at the field, being a reminder to recycle at home, to spectators watching a NASCAR driver hit 180 miles an hour using alternative green fuel, to hearing Jerome Bettis talk about struggling with asthma and the importance of clean air, which he recently did for us at the EPA. It's deeply inspiring to see a coalition of teams and stadiums and players and other organizations who some would say have other things to do, instead coming together on your own to set the right example and engage millions of people in protecting the environment. I always say that protecting our natural environment and treasuring our spaces is a deeply American value. So is sports. What an extraordinary marriage. This forum is an excellent opportunity to build on the changes that have been made and accelerate the momentum of your movement. As a sports fan and someone who cares deeply about our health and the sustainability of our communities, I'm looking forward to a great event and lots to build on from the meetings today. We're happy to be working with you to find a better way to play. Thank you all very much. Enjoy the day here, and I hope you have a really productive meeting. Thanks. Rohan's going to introduce our first panel today.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Administrator Jackson. And before we get started with the panel, I just wanted to thank a couple of people. We couldn't put these events on at the White House without a lot of help. And Martin Tull and the Green Sports Alliance have been a huge help to all of us. Martin, you and your staff really appreciate your help. And then Alan Hershkowitz, who's going to be co-moderating this first panel. Alan, the team at NRDC, yourself and others have just been a huge inspiration to us on this event, and we thank you for that. So to get us started, the two moderators that we have today, Alan Hershkowitz is a senior scientist at the National Resources Defense Council. Dr. Hershkowitz is a leader in the movement to make environmental responsibility understandable and achievable for every individual and institution. He joined the senior staff in 1988, more than 2 decades ago, and has been the force behind some of NRDC's most effective and most visible initiatives. He's a champion of systematic change on critical issues, ranging from recycling to forestry, paper industry impacts, mountaintop coal mining, waste incineration, and medical waste. Thanks, Alan, for joining us. And then very excited to have John Powers. John's a friend and a colleague at CEQ. John was appointed by the President to serve as the administration's federal environmental executive. And in this capacity, John is responsible for promoting environmental initiatives throughout the federal government. Sustainability and energy security are his calling cards, and John previously spent time at the Department of Army where he's a leader on many of the energy and environmental initiatives taking place at DoD. He also served as Chief Operating Officer at the Truman National Security Project, where he focused on energy security issues. And prior to serving at the Truman Project, John served our country for 4 years as an officer in the U.S. Army, including a 15-month tour in Iraq as part of Operation Iraq Freedom. So, John, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Rohan. And thank you so much for joining us here today. As Rohan mentioned, I did spend 15 months in Iraq as a captain in the Army. And one of the most important lessons I've learned, I think, in all my time in public service was literally the first day I showed up to my unit as a fresh lieutenant coming out of college. I got to my artillery unit where, for those who have served, it's a really sort of scary experience because you're walking into a group of soldiers who've done this for sometimes 17, 18, 20 years. They've been doing this their entire career, and all of a sudden you're supposed to be in charge as a young lieutenant. And I luckily had a great platoon sergeant who literally grabbed my lapels and he dragged me around to the side of the motor pool. And he said, "Sir, there are 2 types of leaders in the military. There's those that lead by rank, and there's those that lead by example. The soldiers, they're going to follow the ones that lead by rank because they have to. It's the way the military works. But they want to follow someone that sets a standard and someone that sets an example. I'm lucky because I serve a president who understands that, understands leadership by example. And one of the first things he did early on in his administration was he called on the federal government to lead by example in the areas of energy and sustainability, and specifically put out an executive order called Leadership by Example. And I have the honor of overseeing that and working with the agencies to help push them in that direction. But one of the things I'm really excited about this panel today is these are folks who do exactly the same thing and understand that exact same type of leadership, and they're doing it throughout their industries. And many of you in the room, I think, are part of that as well. There's so much that we can learn from each other, from what we're doing in the federal government. You know, we've got over 500,000 buildings. We have 600,000 vehicles. We have 1.8 million federal employees in pretty much all communities throughout the country. So we have grand challenges when looking at how to reduce our greenhouse gases or increase our renewable energy use or have a more sustainable supply chain. But I think in the sporting industry, you have some incredibly unique challenges as well. And so those lessons that we're going to hear about today, I think, hopefully will be a continued dialogue that Alan and I are already working on, so that we can learn from each other in these areas. We do have some great successes since the president put out the executive order. We have reduced our greenhouse gases. We have increased our renewable energy use. You have things like solar-powered parking arrays going over top of areas for VA hospitals, and they're becoming the key places where senior veterans are coming in to park because they're covered parking. You've got the Army moving forward with a net zero installation effort, where they're trying to get 17 installations that are net zero energy, waste, and water by 2020. You've got folks in the Navy today out in Hawaii launching the Great Green Fleet, which will be sailing on biofuels, a 50-50 blend. It's an incredible effort. So these initiatives are really driven by the leadership shown here by the president, but also by our great employees throughout the federal government. So I'm excited to learn about some of the efforts you have going on, what motivates you in your industries. And you know, I think Alan has really a fantastic breadth of knowledge in this. I've only got to recently know him, and I'm really excited to be working with him on this panel. Some of the things I just want to throw out before we get started, after a little introduction, we'll do a sort of a joint Q&A. We're going to open up some questions to the audience. For those folks watching online, we're taking Twitter questions. John Carson laid out the hashtag earlier, but it's hashtag Green Sports. So please send your questions in. We'll make sure we incorporate them in the conversation. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to my partner, Alan, and thank you so much for joining us.
This is a great day for the planet, really. First of all, I want to thank our friends at CEQ especially, Kyle Learman, Eli Levine, Rohan, John. Thank you so much for validating the work that many of us in this room have been doing for quite a while. The people who founded the sports greening movement, the people who nurtured the sports greening movement, and the people who are leading the sports greening movement are in this room today. And what a beautiful room it is, and what a wonderful validation of our efforts over the last few years. This collaboration between environmentalism and professional sports is unprecedented and holds the potential to be one of the most meaningful collaborations in the history of the environmental movement. 13% of Americans say they follow science. 61% say they follow sports. If you want to change the world, don't emphasize how different you are from everybody else. The fact that we are able to marshal the economic influence of professional sports, it's a $400 billion industry. It's almost as large as the auto industry. The supply chain of professional sports is global. Every industry meets on a baseball field. Every industry meets on a football field or a basketball court. The energy industry, the chemicals industry, the textile industry, the water industry, the food and beverage industry, the plastics industry, all of these industries are affiliated with professional sports. And for me, one of the most beautiful things about professional sports is that it's nonpartisan. This takes our issue to a level of mainstream acknowledgement that, frankly, no other industry, not the film industry and not the music industry, those two other critical cultural sectors, none of those industries can validate the nonpartisan nature of environmentalism as authentically as sports' embrace of this cause. And we do need a cultural shift in our thinking about how we relate to the planet. And as we know from previous progress we've made socially on other cultural shifts, that leadership doesn't always come from government. The Civil Rights Act was enacted not because Congress led the way, but because there was a cultural shift in Americans' thinking about race relations, and it forced the government to act. The Vietnam War did not end because Congress led the way in defunding that conflict. There was a cultural shift in the way people thought about the war, and government responded. The same is true for gender equality, for drunk driving, and for marriage equality. In all of those areas, people have forced government to respond progressively. Frankly, I think it's fair to say that as somebody doing this work for more than 30 years, environmental work, it doesn't seem to me that Congress is leading the way in resolving our most pressing ecological issues, whether that is on global climate disruption or biodiversity loss or water pollution or water scarcity or ocean acidification or the proliferation of toxic wastes. We have many, many environmental issues. And frankly, we're not getting the leadership out of Congress on legislation that some of us would like to see. This collaboration with professional sports offers us the opportunity to educate and encourage Congress about the business case of environmentalism. The fact is that 15 stadiums and arenas in this country are already LEED certified. Actually, it'll be 16 in September when AEG's Barclays Arena opens up in Brooklyn, my hometown. But I don't have any tickets or preferential seats or anything like that. But I'm going to work on that. 17 facilities have already installed solar panels. Now, if you look at the energy production from those solar panels, if you look at the footprint of professional sports, you recognize they're not the biggest ecological pressure on the planet. Professional sports is not the biggest ecological pressure on the planet. But as we know, and as this room knows, there is no one single large undertaking that we could carry out that's going to solve our global ecological pressures. All we can do are relatively small things. Drive more fuel-efficient cars, eat local organic food, conserve water, recycle, be environmentally intelligent in how we procure. The situation we're in, the 90 million tons of global warming pollution that's emitted every day, they come from millions of sources. And it's going to take millions of environmentally intelligent decisions to turn that around. And that's what professional sports is showing us. They're changing the toilet paper to recycled content toilet paper. They're changing their game day programs and their media guides and their concession napkins. They're educating fans, millions of them. The U.S. Tennis Association, the NBA, the National Hockey League, the National Football League, Major League Baseball have all put out public service announcements, some you're going to see, that encourage people to be responsible environmental stewards. So we have a great, great opportunity here. I'm going to now launch into a question for our panel. Let me introduce our panel, by the way. We have distinguished folks. Bob Nutting is the chairman of the board of the Pittsburgh Pirates, one of the best environmentalists I know in the world, happens to own the Pittsburgh Pirates baseball team. That's a wonderful thing. He's just a philanthropist, a cause-oriented businessman with a great conscience. Mike Lynch is the head of sustainability for NASCAR. He'll tell you how influential NASCAR is, whether it's 2 or 3 times the viewership of the NFL and the NBA. But we know that NASCAR, and you know, I worked with Roush Fenway NASCAR Club when they build their cars, and they're going for LEED certification. They produce no waste. A lot of folks just focus on the cars going around the track, but there's a lot more to NASCAR than that. And all sports and all businesses and all culture engender environmental impacts. It's not just NASCAR cars going around the track. Mike Richter, who won the Stanley Cup for the New York Rangers, a Hall of Fame goalie, followed up his career in the NHL by going to Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Science, getting a degree, now runs a company called Healthy Planet Partners. He's here representing the National Hockey League, one of the leaders in our sports greening movement. So I want to give a shout out to the folks from the leagues, from Major League Baseball, from the NFL, from the National Basketball Association, from the USTA, from Major League Soccer. Oh God, if I forget anybody, I'm screwed. Thank you so much for your embrace of this cause. What I want to ask the panel is this. As everybody knows, sports embraces causes. Literacy, supporting the troops, housing, poverty. What is it about environmentalism? What motivated you, and let's start with Bob Nutting, what motivated you to embrace environmentalism as a cause to publicize and to incorporate into your business dealings?
Perfect. Alan, thanks. And let me start just by, John, thank you for including and putting this together. And Alan, your comments covered most of what I was hoping to say today. The only thing I need to disagree with is the comment that only 17% follow science and 61% follow sports. I think that's technically accurate, but most of us in the room recognize that you're the rock star here today because I think the reason we are as engaged as we are, while I've had a personal passion for the environment, a personal commitment to sustainability through my involvement in Nature Conservancy, frankly, growing up in a challenged state like West Virginia where we have beautiful natural resources and we have streams that run red with acid mine drainage. But really ignited my excitement for sustainability in sports when I saw Alan on a panel. And you helped open up my eyes to the visibility and awareness that we can drive in sports to this topic. People look at sports stars as role models. It's an opportunity to demonstrate great behavior. We have 2 million people, more since we're in first place now, coming through the stadium every year. It's an opportunity to demonstrate good behavior, whether it's a recycling program, which we didn't have 4 years ago. We sent 1.2 million bottles and cans into the landfill just 4 years ago before we got started. No reason for that to happen in today's world. We can take the simple steps, model behavior, that that we can indeed have a positive impact. And so I think the reason I'm excited is because it's something we can do. We can make a real impact through the world of sports, opening people's eyes up, demonstrating good behavior, and helping to move that needle and move those million little decisions that need to be made by making a few good decisions of our own.
Beautiful, thanks. Mike Richter from the NHL.
Well, I would just echo that, and thank you for having us. I think why there's so many causes in the NHL and all sports really have a great community relations. They understand that they're a reflection of their individual towns, and they try to get out in the community. I played for the New York Rangers, and they were great about getting us out there, the league and individual teams. But why sports and the environment? Because I think there's a perfect intersection there. Human performance is all about health. You cannot perform to your maximum unless you're healthy. And the environment and human health intersect, as everybody knows. And so I think it shouldn't be considered a rare thing for sports to be talking about the environment. It's the absolutely perfect platform for so many reasons, but the specific one is just, it's about human performance. And, you know, I sat with Alan, with Commissioner Bettman, and the first thing he said is, I want to be the greenest sports league. Everybody says that, but it's very, very difficult to do. And it is these million little decisions on how you go about it. And the 180-degree turn that I've seen even in the last 5 years has been stunning, and it's mostly from a lot of your efforts, but I think that consciousness is starting to dawn on a lot of the leaders in sports, and it's going to filter down into the public that watches them.
Great. Mike Lynch.
I think Mike, you hit it spot on from NASCAR's perspective. The insight that got this all started in NASCAR, which yes, we have an enormous fan base, we have an enormous weekly viewership, incredibly loyal, incredibly proprietary fan base in terms of pride around the sport. And so you put all of that together, what it actually adds up to is an opportunity to make relevant, intuitive, and simple what green and sustainability can really be about, which performance is really the key. So the opportunity to break the compromise that's essentially in the minds of folks that having a sustainability focus or a green focus involves compromising something in terms of product experience, actual performance, et cetera, that's simply not necessary. And actually, we actually feel, the original insight to launch NASCAR Green 4 years ago that, emanated from our leadership in a very real way, our chairman, Brian France, Mike Helton, our president, Lisa Kennedy, the CEO of International Speedway Corporation. They had a sense that the country was moving in a green direction and that NASCAR could participate in that in all humility in a way that would be productive. Well, what's actually happened over these 4 years, which I think everybody's saying, is that breaking the compromise of performance and green is already happening. And actually, when you actually mentioned there's a lot more to NASCAR than the cars going around the track, I would actually say you're absolutely right. And the things that Roush Fenway are doing in terms of recycling 96% of the material from a retired race car, that's phenomenal, right? And the idea that consumers could do that as well, an end-of-life cycle vehicle, doesn't have to go to a junkyard. It can actually go into a recycled materials pipeline that ends up back in the economy. I mean, that's a fantastic story, right? But by all means, focus on the cars on the track, because our American ethanol program with Sunoco Green E15, with 15% American grown by American corn farmers, American made by American ethanol plants that have created 500,000 jobs in the past decade, we get more horsepower out of that. So it's not you're trading off something for performance. The cars go faster. And you can actually apply that thinking to everything. Recycling, renewable energy, green product development, the whole basket. And that's something that's why our fans are 50% more likely than non-fans to actually think of their household as very green and looking for ways to positively impact the environment. Whereas 4 years ago, fans and non-fans in our research were the same. But now, NASCAR fans think green to a greater extent than the average in a world where the average moved over the past 4 years. Right. And we really believe that a big driver of that is the fact that performance doesn't have to be sacrificed for sustainability. And that's our opportunity.
So John Powers and I are going to alternate on questions. And John?
Mike, that's actually a great lead into my next question. A couple years ago, I was part of an organization where we helped sponsor actually an ARCA team, but it was part of a NASCAR race out in Kansas City. Went to the Kansas City Speedway. We had a group of veterans out there talking about energy security and sustainability, and we had over 30,000 folks at this weekend come by to learn more from us about this. We had a car wrapped with solar, it had solar panels and windmills on it. And for me, that was actually my first race event, and it was an eye-opener. And it really, I think, helped educate me on the ability that the sports industry has to engage with your fans. And I think you talked a little bit about that, but what are some of the initiatives that you're doing to engage with those fans?
Okay. I mean, glad to go through those. And actually, you mentioned sort of the car, and just wanted to kind of add this too. It's actually very much not a small thing to drive a high MPG car, right? I mean, CAFE standards are helping sort of nudge the industry in a direction of increased efficiency, but what's happening today as well is, and we can reflect that on the track, is that, and you're seeing it in the marketplace, right? I don't know. I mean, back in the 70s when folks bought compact cars, you absolutely sacrificed performance to have that higher miles per gallon and to actually, not have to wait in a line at the gas station back in the 70s when there were shortages and that sort of thing. Today, compact cars, subcompact cars that Toyota, Ford, Chevy, and Dodge sell, our manufacturers that are in NASCAR, are awesome cars. I mean, I don't know, folks in this audience probably drive. I mean, you know, the Dodge Dart, the Chevy Volt, the Chevy Cruze, you know, Toyota Camry Hybrid flies, right? The Ford Fusion is a great car. So you're not trading anything off. And so what we do in NASCAR is try to use the sport in all humility to offer up visibility and relevance and simplicity around that. So really, we break it down the same way everybody does. I'm sure, you know, Bob, you think about this the same way. I mean, you gather a whole bunch of people in a place, there's certain things that are pretty basic, right? You've got waste to deal with, you've got emissions, and you've got power generation. Right? And so, you know, recycling, and the thing about recycling is kind of like, recycling frankly is almost ho-hum now, right? Because over these 4 years, folks just kind of, I mean, I'm sure everybody, your kids have educated you about recycling, right? Our daughter Samantha, she lectured me about drinking water out of a plastic bottle because it's not a reusable container. She's 4.5. So, and you know, Coca-Cola, official soft drink of NASCAR, you know, they sell beverages in plastic bottles. So I actually explained to her, I said, you know, look, you know, you can't always have a reusable container. And she just looked at me like I was crazy, right? Because in her school, they're using reusable containers all the time, and they've actually cut their trash bill by 80% in her preschool as a result of reusable containers. So, so waste, renewable energy, you know, and power generation. Brandon Igdowski, who's here in the front row. I mean, we should actually applaud Brandon because he has the largest renewable energy plant of any sports stadium in the world at Pocono Raceway. 3 megawatts of power. Put it in on a retired parking lot. The trees were gone anyway. You know, 25 acres of solar panels across the street from the track. I mean, 4 years ago, are you kidding me? Nobody would have thought that was even remotely possible, let alone plausible. So, you know, Brandon, thank you, you know. In the area of waste, you know, Drew Patey's here from Safety Clean, will be on the panel later. You know, NASCAR withdrew, and with Safety Clean, we're doing green way before it was popular or something of a national focus. 200,000 gallons of automotive fluids per year are recycled through the re-refining technology that Safety Clean has, which is absolutely best in class and world leading. I mean, that's something that you come into our garage and you look around, we're racing those cars, but the stuff that goes into racing those cars isn't going on the trash heap. It's all getting recycled, and it's first principles science that makes that all possible. So it's really profound, actually. And then from the standpoint of emissions, you know, our American Ethanol program, that's very high tech, you know, with Growth Energy and the National Corn Growers Association and Green Plains Renewable Energy and Novozymes and you know, the companies that are involved in that platform. I mean, you know, making corn ethanol is not, you know, stirring ethanol in a pot. It is high tech science in our country, and it's something that creates real white-collar, professional jobs in the heartland that people can grow up in a small town in the Midwest now, go off to a college, a fancy college on the coast, come back and have a lifetime of professional employment back where they grew up because of ethanol. And it's not anything other than really just absolute rocket science as a result. So that's high tech. Low tech, we plant trees, which I'm sure other folks do too as well. So initiatives across the board.
Thanks. And Bob, from the, you know, being in first place, it's probably a nice way to help engage with your fans. If there's anything specific the Pirates are doing to help bring this to folks' attention?
Yeah, I think what we do is, I mean, we're all about families in Pittsburgh, both at the Pirates, also at our resort at Seven Springs, and so really try to find ways to engage an entire family, engage kids. And so whether it's something like a direct outreach program that players can come, whether it's talking to schools, whether it's PSAs during and before every game, those are very simple, very direct methods for outreach. We built a green demonstration field in Pittsburgh for a youth baseball group. Wow. So, you know, very innovative drainage systems, very innovative a rain garden interpretive signs that we partnered with Western Pennsylvania Conservancy. So using it as a hands-on example, something kids love to do, get outside, play baseball, exposed to healthy activity, but at the same time use it as a demonstration of we can have great green examples that you can physically touch, hands-on. And you're right that the youth is so tuned in It's something they expect. They're not impressed that we're not sending cans to the landfill anymore. Of course you're not sending cans to landfill. It's not obvious.
Right.
But I think where they do get excited is when we see some of those innovative, hands-on, very tangible, youth-focused activities.
Excellent. And Mike, as a diehard Sabres fan, you've ripped my heart out on numerous occasions. But I'd love to ask what you sort of see in the NHL in that community.
Well, I'm glad I could help you with that one, John. The environmental movement is all about efficiency. It's about eliminating waste in whatever form, whether it's recycling cans or having a car that goes faster. And so is sports. If I'm a faster runner than John, I get to the ball first. That's what sports is, and so it mirrors so well. And I think one of the things that we're looking at with the buildings themselves, and Brandon and I had this discussion last year when we first met. I mean, it's an amazing thing that he did, but what you're trying to do is make these buildings as efficient as the athletes that use them. I mean, it's incredible when the irony, if you have these highly tuned athletes, they sleep, they drink, they eat very specifically, and they're playing in a building that may have been designed 100 years ago, the same technologies that is, and it's belching out oil or whatever it is. And so you're starting to bring the sports facilities up to the same level of technology and innovation as the athletes that are using them. And I think specifically to the question, what is the NHL trying to do? I think the really big message that you have to have out there is that the environment is not about the spotted owl. It is not about trees, it's about people. And so when you're talking about efficiency, you're talking about buildings that perform better, that feel better, that save you money, programs that eliminate waste, save money. We'll get into some of the specific programs in a minute, but what the NHL has done is actually helped out the community. So they said, oh, it's a green program, but it ends up feeding people because it's saving food waste or restoring water or whatever it is. It has to be about people, not just the trees and the birds. And I think that's a really important message to get out there because these aren't just little benefits. They are the main benefits of environmental efficiency.
Great. So I'm going to ask the next two questions. This question has to do with the business side of this issue. I remember about 4 years ago, Gary Bettman, the commissioner of the NHL, asked me to lead a discussion at the Board of Governors meeting of the NHL. And I remember I was terrified, thinking, hockey team owners, what does, an environmentalist from New York City have to share with hockey team owners from around the country? Turned out to be one of the most wonderful discussions in my career that I ever engaged in. These folks got it. They saw the opportunity for not only cost savings, but also for great branding, and frankly, a lot of them, most of them, very oriented towards this particular cause. So what I want to ask the panel is, tell us about your business partners' embrace. How did you communicate this to the many stakeholders? Obviously, you own the team. I'm talking to Bob Nutting now. You still have to convince people. How have your vendors, your business partners, your sponsors, your employees, tell us about, and I'd like this from everybody, but let's start with Bob Nutting. Tell us about how it was received in your organization.
Perfect. I think, Alan, as you remember, let me start with the cultural transformation at the company and the organization, because we did not have built into our DNA at all an awareness of sustainability and awareness of environmentally responsible lifestyle. And so what we did, with your help and with NRDC, we convened a meeting and a group across our entire platform. So we brought our newspaper publishers in, we brought our magazine publishers in, Mother Earth News, our publisher there, Brian Welch, is a real thought leader in the space, brought him in with our key executives at the baseball team and also with our key executives at the resort company, and sort of pushed them all into a room together for a couple of days. My role there was to make it crystal clear that an organizational priority was going to be a fresh look at environmental sustainability, a fresh look at how do we need to behave and act differently. What was really exciting to me was, and Alan was a part of driving that discussion as we looked at the biggest opportunity areas, biggest risks, biggest problems throughout the platform, the number of common themes that came out and allowed us to focus on conservation, it allowed us to focus on recycling, allowed us to focus on building awareness, and each one of the divisions was able to grab a hold of different parts and activate it in different ways. But having a common organizational vision made a huge impact. And what I really saw was the ability for the employees to then bubble up. Once they knew it was something that we valued, the amount of input, the amount of ideas, the number of individual tactical thoughts, very few of those came from organizational direction. What they came was, we're allowed to do it, we have a mission, and the number of tactical ideas that, well, here's how we can solve this problem better. Here's how we can make our snowmaking system at a ski resort much more effective by repurposing a solar stirrer that was used in our sewage waste plant. We run a plant there. And by doing some repurposing, the amount of creativity unleashed inside the organization, that was maybe one of the most gratifying parts as you built that level of enthusiasm. As you walk into a room, as we move from literally millions of pieces of styrofoam at Seven Springs and at the ballpark to sustainable cups. We had a new corn cup that looked a lot like styrofoam, and we had CEO of the resort, president of the baseball team, a couple of our publishers, and Frank Coonley, our president, brought out these cups, and people weren't going to touch them. It was like giving you a plastic bottle. So there's no way in the world, culturally, this is no longer acceptable in this organization. And if I said, oh no, here's our new corn cup, and everybody relaxed, and were afraid I was going to walk into the room. But I think that simply changing the expectation inside an organization is what allowed us to move the needle. Just as you've talked about the commissioner, you set the expectation. People want to be able to behave responsibly. You have to give them permission and build that organization that it's accepted and expected every day.
Mike Richter? I will repeat the question. Only because I was asked to do so for our TV audience, not because Bob Nutting confused us, which you didn't. So tell us about how the NHL, 30 plus teams, thousands of employees, how did you mobilize your partners? What was their reaction? The employees, the operators of the arenas, sponsors, vendors?
Well, I'd like to say I mobilized them. I certainly didn't. I think it really came from Commissioner Bettman. As you said in some of those meetings, there's 30 teams, and you can't just from on high say, this is what we're doing. These are individual people with individual companies. And just as Bob said that he set a mandate for these guys and they try to follow it, Commissioner Bettman can do that, but it's very difficult because these 30 teams are in geographically different locations, different energy prices, different climate, all kinds of things, cultural and physical. So I think one of the most important things that we are doing at the NHL is getting a baseline testing of what your energy, what your waste is, and what your water use is. And then you can start to see what the best practices are. And so if Bob at the Pittsburgh Pirates is doing something very creative with water, then the New York Rangers can say, wow, that's something that we can employ. Or maybe that doesn't work for us, but we'll try a waste recycling program from somewhere else. Very important. If you can't measure it, you don't know how to really fix it, number one. But I think it does come, to an extent from that leadership up the top. When NHL started their food recovery program, this is a really enormous thing. 15 of the league's teams signed up right away. And that's kind of just like, look, I buy your argument, I want to do this, 15, now it's all 30 are participating. So it really does have to have, you have to have some leadership because there's a lot of inertia out there and there's a lot of fear and you're at a meeting trying to run a business, you're not in it. This is the National Hockey League, it's not NRDC, and they want to actually move their business along. How can we do it and help the environment? So I think teams are learning, but it has to come from that leadership.
Mike Lynch, how's NASCAR communicated its embrace of environmental stewardship to its business partners?
That actually, another way we've been asked that question is, what was the biggest challenge that we had in this, which is totally related to this. The first 6 months for us with NASCAR Green were by far the most challenging because we announced that it was an initiative and the NASCAR stakeholdership, which is literally, it's very similar, Mike, to what you were saying, and it's a stakeholdership and an ecosystem. It's not a command control situation. So you have to be careful what you ask for. So literally, and this is a stakeholdership that's incredibly passionate like the fans are, incredibly well-intentioned, and the energy is just enormous. So when NASCAR Green was announced, the first impulse was to do things. And actually we had to compete with that impulse to say, everybody please wait. And that first 6 months where we made the rounds with all of the major stakeholders, broadcast partners, racetrack owners, race team owners, drivers, all the major sponsors, manufacturer partners, everybody, you say, what do you think? And actually, that was where the real opportunities came from, because what we immediately figured out, which really was obvious from the start, quite frankly, because of what these companies were doing. A company like Coca-Cola, building and growing their global beverage business by 5+% per year while reducing their environmental impact, that is so hard to do, yet they've been doing it for a decade. So what we were able to do with Coca-Cola was learn an enormous amount from them, learn an enormous amount from Safety Clean, learn an enormous amount from 3M, from the partners that were in the sport who've had sustainability in their business already, and then think about, okay, how can we apply what they're doing from literally a technology or solution transfer standpoint in ways, and really the way we thought about it was that measurably impact, so we can back it up with numbers and it's very real, but then also it matters. Back to your point, Alan, which is, you can have all the environmental, addressing environmental impact in the world in terms of first principles science and being very smart, but if it resonates at the same time, then you've got something. So when Coca-Cola Recycling stepped up and said, hey, we've got this business unit in recycling, PET plastic, cans, you name it, and all the impact that has, and we've been doing it for years, and we'd like to get into campgrounds with you. Largest campground in the United States on any given weekend is the NASCAR race. It's a small Midwestern town that gets together with a curbside recycling opportunity. And then, go figure, you've got, I think unprecedented, you've got a soft drink company in Coca-Cola and a beer company in Coors working together on recycling. Those are different products, right? So, but the solutions behind it that Coca-Cola developed in their business over the years in terms of just high efficiency recycling, very smart repurposing of the material, their presence in those recycled material markets at a time when those markets were in chaos, 2008, 2009, 2010, you guys all remember the news reports, right, of cardboard boxes stacking up at the ports because there was no export market for them because the world economy had stopped, right? In the context of all of that, we were able to work with folks like Coca-Cola to really do this in a smart way that mattered to the fans. But the first 6 months was all about thinking and talking and making the rounds, and by all means don't do anything, and that was by far the hardest time in this.
So listening to the answers, I'm reminded of the saying that an organization is the shadow of its leadership. I know this is true. Commissioner Seelig at Major League Baseball, David Stern at the NBA, Billie Jean King at the USTA, Gary Bettman, of course, at the National Hockey League, Roger Goodell. When the leadership embraces this, then it trickles down and everybody pays attention. So now I'm going to give you a lob for you to hit out of the park. I couldn't resist saying that. My favorite initiative in all the sports work we're doing is the measurement implementation that has been implemented by Major League Baseball, by the National Basketball Association, by the National Hockey League. These leagues are now measuring energy use, water use, waste generation and recycling, and paper consumption. And it's not seamless, it's evolving. There's work in implementation barriers, but all of these major leagues have embraced the idea of measurement. And in my 30 years of work, I know that if you measure, you figure out a way to improve. I don't even ask people to change anymore. I just say, let's measure, because I know what's going to follow is some kind of beneficial change. That's my favorite. So what I want to know, and this is the easy one, what are you particularly most proud of? What initiative do you, when people say, what are you doing to green your organization, tell me about your work, what do you feel most proud of? Let's start with Bob Nutting.
Well, Alan, if it's all right, I'm going to tie into your measuring, because as a business person, I deeply believe you do get what you measure at the end of the day. And baseball, Commissioner Seelig has been incredibly effective creating that, John McHale, incredibly effective building that mechanism. But what it has played to and the reason it's been so effective and helped really light up our employees, you know, Mike, as you talk about sports being about performance, sports is really about competition. And watching our team measure their diversion rate against Seattle, against San Francisco.
That's tough. That's tough.
But these guys are reporting, we moved from 0 to 21 to 43. Last year at 64. We're at 67% this month. These guys know it. They're watching it. They're reporting to me every month, and they're also reporting where do we stand, because they are extraordinarily competitive people. That's what sports is about. And I think that trying to find that way to ignite the competitive nature, you know, there's not a person in Pittsburgh who doesn't know we're not tied right now with Cincinnati and we need to win the games this weekend. There's not a person in the organization on the sustainability side that doesn't know where our diversion rate is, where we're moving it. And your insight in how do we measure, how do we drive the excitement and make it something that engages at a level that they understand. They certainly understand resource reduction, but understanding that competitive element within the leagues, and as baseball becomes the greenest league, and a competition between them, which frankly, Alan, you and NRDC could foster, that really drives people excitement, energy level, and it's been fun to watch.
Beautiful. Mike Richter?
Well, I think that competition is great among the teams and the leagues, obviously. I think it's amazing because I think baseball is one of the first that you would even discuss, and then the NHL tries to leapfrog that, and we keep getting best practices. I think a simple program, along with the measurement, and I think great things will come in that because we're really talking about the building envelope and a lot of the efficiency there. So I think there's going to be huge strides coming on the heels of that measurement once that data is fully collected. But one that really just interests me is the food donation program. So you think of an event, not as big as baseball, but Madison Square Garden, for instance, close to 20,000 people come to a game. How many hot dogs, how many burgers, how many whatever did they make that has been prepared and is untouched? And where does it go? It just is thrown away and it ends up in a landfill, thrown off methane gas somewhere. So a couple things happen. A, it's an environmental problem. There's like 800 trucks go out of Manhattan every night to dump their trash. A big part of it is coming from these big companies. So, you know, you're filling up a landfill and it's expensive as heck to do it. So what the NHL has done is they're taking their prepared unused food and giving it to food banks. And to date, I think it's somewhere on the order of 200 tons has been kept out of landfills and 300,000 meals have been created by this. I mean, this is not just like you're taking them out of the landfills, you're actually feeding needy people. So back to that point, it's measurable because you can see the tonnage, so that's a great thing. It's avoided cost, so it's paying for itself and then some. And it's helping who? Not just the environment, but people. People are getting free meals, and I mean, if you want to call a big Sabrett hot dog a free meal, you can, but I mean, this is a big, big deal. So I think that kind of elegance of turning what was a waste product into something that is productive for society is a great thing. Another one is the water programs the NHL has. They came out and said, look, for every goal that's scored, we're going to donate 1,000 gallons of water to streams that are in need. And so they're really kind of, how do you say, re-watering the streams. Diverted streams are a big problem, especially in the West. Hockey is so dependent upon water. The game started on frozen lakes and rivers. And so last year, there's 6,700 goals scored in the NHL times 1,000 gallons of water that were now restored into these riverbeds. So it's a really interesting kind of measurable on the community level program, and more, and I think bigger ones will come as we get the whole energy envelope from the building. So very excited, and it'll stay with those kind of measurable initiatives.
Those are really important. I mean, we throw out 100 billion pounds of food in this country every year as waste, 100 billion pounds. 98% of it goes into landfills, is not composted. If we recovered just 5% of that food, we could feed 20 million people. Food waste is a big issue, and I really want to applaud the NHL for what you're doing there. And of course, water scarcity. You know, I mean, Colorado rivers. I don't want to get into that. Mike Lynch.
You know, I'll just describe bookends on this in terms of pride for the sport. When we were doing the testing for American ethanol, for Sunoco Green E15, American-grown, American-made ethanol blend, it was a serious effort, and actually it was one that involved It's probably one of the larger efforts that's ever been done with confidentiality around it where there wasn't leak. Probably 600 people were involved between the engine builders and the race teams and our competition group and everyone. And the thing about it was the pride aspect of it was, this is an American product that increases performance, and then the competitive aspect came out in the race teams right there, which was literally when the engine guys figured out that there was, because of the higher octane, as a result, there was more performance in there. The first thing they were thinking about, aside the fact we want to make sure it was going to work, was getting more. I want to get more. I want to figure out, I want to apply my scientific knowledge and my understanding of engineering to getting more performance out of that American-grown, American-made technology in green. So that, being able to say that here today to you folks is an enormous sense of pride for our industry, because it's something that really puts reality and practicality and importance around what we're all talking about today. Then the sort of on the other end of the spectrum of things, I mean, just personally, one of the most touching events that I've ever been to in my life was Texas Motor Speedway, fall of 2010, their tree planting event. So we do 10 trees for every green flag that drops at a race. So we actually tie it to our competition. On average, we have about 10 green flags between the start of the race, cautions, and all that. So it's about 100 trees, and this is not a seedling program for us. These are overhead trees that are going to live their life. They'll neutralize the carbon from a car, basically, 1 ton stored over the lifespan, et cetera. But when those trees were planted in Fort Worth, in an economically disadvantaged area of Fort Worth, at a 6th grade magnet school, as part of an agronomy park creation on the grounds of the school, where the president, Eddie Gossage Jr., was given essentially a mural that was signed by all 600 kids in the school saying thank you, and they put on a play and said, thank you for impacting the environment in a positive way. Thank you for including us, and we love the sport, and we're proud. That was just something, I mean, talk about a life-nurturing event, and something that really, and we do that all across the country now in 25 race markets. That's real pride and something that we really care about, and it actually has a measurable impact on things too.
My favorite NASCAR is the solar panels at Pocono.
Yeah.
John Powers.
Thanks, Alan.
Can we do a time check, by the way? Do we?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Good. Great.
Yeah, I was just going to remind anyone who's watching online, or if you're tweeting from here, the hashtag is #GreenSports. I don't know if you have any questions in from Twitter, but let me open this up to the audience to see if there's any questions out here for our panel.
We have more, but if not,
we got more.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
So, as you know, Mike Lynch, I drive in the ARCA series, which is a development league of NASCAR. Now I'm actually driving the clean energy race car that John Powers was talking about.
That's a NASCAR driver, by the way. That's a NASCAR driver.
My question is, when can I look forward? I know I was really excited when we started running 15% biofuel mix. When do you estimate that it's possible that NASCAR could be running on 100% biofuel?
Okay, so the question is, all right, so we're running 15% ethanol in the race cars now. When can we expect 100? This is another. It's a great question because it focuses in on relevance. Okay, so folks in this room, you guys being sort of close to this general area, you probably know what's going on out there in the marketplace. Right? You go and fill up at the pump today, you get on average about 7.5% ethanol in your tank. The blend wall is 10. That's sort of the maximum kind of mandate nationally. EPA is a huge aspect to that as far as the rationale for it and the backdrop for it and the testing of it in the car fleet on our streets. Right? So E15 in the marketplace has been approved for cars 10 years old or younger. All good. Put it in. You get higher octane. You have a cleaner fuel. Bingo, right? That's what our program's about. We're showing everybody, the 300 million people that are our fellow Americans, that you can put 15% ethanol, you can run it at 850 horsepower in the most demanding conditions in the world with drivers who, if it didn't work better, would sure tell you. But in fact, what they say is, oh yeah. When Dale Earnhardt Jr. says that it was a seamless transition to American ethanol at the Daytona 500 in 2011, well, guess what? 67 million people all of a sudden care about that, right? So when Dale says it, it means something. When Jimmy says it, it means something, right? So it's that relevance. And this is a struggle that's out there in our marketplace right now, where the ethanol industry is pushing toward E15, and we're there for them, right? We're there for them with Sunoco Green E15. We're there for them to show week in, week out, this weekend, next weekend, the weekend after that, that 15% ethanol is in that car and it's performing great. It'd be just fine in your street car too. And actually, and just as a factual matter, we didn't have to change hardly anything, right? We tweaked the car just slightly in order to just, you know, be compatible and whatever, but there was really nothing to do. Same for you if your car is 10 years old or younger, and if it's older than that's probably okay too, on average, but you know, some exceptions, you want to be attentive to it. So that's, you know, 100% biofuel. If 100% biofuel were in the marketplace and that was relevant on the street, go down the block and you're going to fill up, of course we'd be talking to the ethanol industry and to Sunoco about it.
John Powers, let me just say, I mean, that's an important question because it gets to, you know, we have this infrastructure that has been built up for hundreds of years that's moving in a particular direction. It's even been subsidized, and it continues to be subsidized, moving in a particular direction, which has impacted the environment. Turning that ship around is going to take many years. So, you know, when, like the NHL program, the MLB program, we said, let's talk about the next 10 years. You know, and how we could do better. We don't even talk about best. So,
and I think there's some real synergies here in sort of what we're doing in the federal government. You know, there's an effort at the Department of Energy called Clean Cities, where they're looking at how to help build up some of that infrastructure. You know, I talked about earlier today, the Navy is putting an entire fleet out there, including jets, on a 50-50 blend of biofuels and the military's version of JP8. Mike, I'm going to follow up and introduce you to some of the Navy scientists so the folks at NASCAR can get connected, because there is a synergy there. In what we're doing. And I think the president has put some real investment and emphasis in that infrastructure so we can continue to move the country forward in that direction. And thanks to Leilani for the question. Leilani was a great role model to have out at the race in Kansas City. We had not only a NASCAR driver, a female driver, and an admiral sit there signing autographs for about 3 days straight. It was quite an endurance test for you, thank you.
So we do have more questions to ask from the podium here, but if there's any other question, sir?
Jack Hasselblad with I'd like to ask the panel just how you are engaging or plan to engage the players, the drivers, the professional athletes in your respective initiatives.
3 professional athletes came out of that family. I don't know how that happened. That's just right.
And just to repeat the question for the folks online, he asked how the leagues plan to engage the players.
We certainly use the players as a part of our direct outreach. Again, I think as you look at players as some of the great role models that kids are looking up to, it's important they see them both modeling good behavior but also talking about it. And so in our PSAs, in our in-game, in our events, we are always engaging the star power to get out and drive that awareness. Just as you said, you know, if a driver, if a player comes out and makes a strong statement, if James McDonald, who loves to fish, is seen out with a trout catch and release, if he's out there saying the environment is important, people are listening. And the other thing that's been very interesting and gratifying, they believe it. They're the generation that are very tuned in, and frankly, they're going to begin pushing us to drive to higher levels. I think that's critically important.
And Mike is a Hall of Famer player yourself.
Well, actually, that's a really good point. You know, our game is very close to being outdoors. The game has started in Canada on the frozen ponds. Most of the guys go back in the summer and they fish and they work out, and they're very close to the land. A lot of hunters, a lot of demographics that really need to get this message out, and they understand that connection between their environment and their quality of life. Interesting thing, I don't know if the NHL as a group needs to say you players must do this, because both are leading right now. I think it was 3 years ago, the David Suzuki Foundation had, there was no mandate. They said, would you guys like to go carbon neutral on your travel this year? 82 games before the playoffs start, you're traveling all over. Many environmentalists look at sports as a real drag. And instead, you're kind of turning this whole equation around and say, look, we can be the leaders in this rather than something kind of superfluous and burning a lot of fuel. So 500 of the 700 NHL players, not because there was a mandate from the NHL, but took it on their own to take a check out of their own wallet and say, I'm going to go carbon neutral this year. They bought carbon credits, which, you know, you can say is just more window dressing, but this is a kind of it was a pretty interesting initiative. They started that. Nobody told them to do it. So I think that a lot of the players across all the sports that I found, and you'll hear from Ovi later on today, they get this. They get it. They're close to the land. Health and the environment intersect. They'll be leading. They don't need anybody to tell them to.
That's great.
In NASCAR, in our sport, there's the hard work behind the scenes around this that I'll just explain very briefly, and then there's what you see on TV. And the hard work behind it is literally when we launch, and you guys probably do something very similar, where we spend a lot of time at the racetrack when we're launching a new initiative, whatever it is in green, the FAQs around it, the facts around it, the basics. Not biased, right down the middle, just the facts. We get out there into our industry with the drivers and owners in all 3 national series for sure, and share the information with them so that they can speak on behalf of it in their own words, if asked. And that's, you can imagine, I mean, we've got, you know, you're talking about a lot of people, and a lot of people who you have to spend real quality time with in order to kind of get some of this stuff across, because it's complicated, right? I mean, something as mundane on the surface as recycling a plastic bottle actually is a very profound technical challenge in helping folks understand so they can comment. Then there's what we actually are able to do in terms of real engagement to get that message out there so that in fact you can move the perception around green of 67 million people in 4 years, which I think is unprecedented. And that's, you know, public service announcements, the 10 million viewers see each week, where, you know, it still gives me chills a little bit when it starts and says, you know, can a sport change the way you think about the environment? And then you see Ryan Newman standing on his farmland, and then Matt Kenseth, Brad Keselowski, et cetera, right? And we run those every weekend to get that message out from the voice of the drivers. And then the other thing that happens too is, you know, a racetrack is kind of a busy place and there's reporters all over. They stop a driver or owner and ask them about American ethanol, ask a Coca-Cola family driver about the Coca-Cola recycling. The beauty of it is they speak in their own words and it comes across as it should, which is genuine. And it comes, yeah, I'll share a little anecdote with you. So when we were doing, you know, we were doing a launch of something and we were doing a video, Mike Skinner, you know, one of the real historic figures, particularly in our truck series, and he drove in the Cup level as well. And he's a guy who people really look up to in the sport. And we were going, and I was working with him. I said, hey, you know, here's what this is about, and going through it. And he finally stopped me and said, wait a minute, you trying to tell me what to say? And in all honesty, I said, yeah, I kind of am. And I said, no, I'm good. I'm good. And he was fantastic because it was in his own words, from his own perspective. And the thing about our athletes, our fans know they will never say anything they don't believe. So that when you get there with that, it has so much power. So that's, I mean, that's an awesome question, actually.
Sure. Well, we do have some questions in from Twitter. So I'd like to ask one from Katie Myers, and thank you so much for submitting it. So how do you see the job industry expanding from the efforts in green sports? So what opportunities in the job sector may be out there?
Why don't we start with Bob Nuttingham?
Well, thanks. I think in terms of the job industry, what we really need are people who are aware, who are thinking, who are tuned in, and who are creative and innovative. Because every day there are new opportunities that come up, and just as we talked about it at the ski resort, water usage is a major issue, and what we need are people who are thinking deeply and innovatively and not afraid to say, we have a better opportunity here. Frankly, whether it's the composting, whether it's the food outreach, rock and wrap it up that we do on the I think those are all pieces that take a tremendous amount of sort of time, energy, engagement, and that's what I see, at least on the employee side, as our partners really driving it forward.
Have you seen any sort of exciting innovations come from some of your employees?
All of our innovations come from our employees. I mean, I think we never have good ideas in the corporate office. I think I'm told that routinely. Our job is to set a clear vision and then hire people and enable them to launch and go forward. And at the end of the day, my job is to measure and hold accountable. And frankly, that's the structure that we use, whether it's building a championship baseball club, whether it's a great publishing company, or within the green initiatives. When people understand where they're headed, but are empowered to be able to drive forward with creativity and innovative of their own, knowing at the end of the day they're going to be held accountable and measured and celebrated. And if I can just divert for a minute, we were talking about the question of 100% versus 15%. Alan, one of the things that you really taught me that I think is important for this room is to be willing to celebrate the small successes. We cannot all do everything. We will not be perfect. We do a lot of stuff wrong every day. But at the same time, if we're conscious, if we move forward, and if we are willing in this kind of a forum to celebrate the successes, if you change one light bulb, that's one light bulb that got changed. If you, convert, whether it's toilet paper or whether it's cups, if you take one simple step forward and we celebrate those, that's where you start to drive those million good decisions. And if we're all held to the standard of we didn't use 100%, therefore we failed, while we should demonstrate leadership, and we should be out on the innovative edge, and baseball should help lead the way on the civil rights movement with Jackie Robinson. You need to be a leader and innovator, but if we can't celebrate the small steps along the way, we're losing the really important part of that message.
Mike, as someone who's now gone sort of on the private equity side and it's looking to invest in businesses that are doing this, do you see some opportunities growing from the efforts in the industry?
Yeah, it's enormous. A lot of the technology is available. It exists. We don't, and we'll continue to innovate, and we need to, but we haven't deployed to the extent that we're capable. Right. All the existing technologies, the military is doing incredible work. NASCAR, that's the whole thing. That's why we're here. We're trying to get this in the consciousness of people to recognize that there are solutions, not just problems, there's solutions here. And when that scale gets large enough, the demand will be there. You have solar integrators, you have people that can sell, American-made biofuels. I mean, the capability is there. The demand needs to be there. And the only way you get demand is to get people aware, and that's where sports comes in. So, I mean, if you're asking about green jobs, they're just waiting to be asked to be employed, basically. And so I know in my current job now, I try to finance a lot of this stuff because that is the big hurdle. But that scale will continue to grow, drive down prices, and really make this a larger part of our energy mix and our waste and how we just look at everything from sports to regular old business.
Right. I'd like to come at this from another side. We're celebrating here. This is a great affirmation of our work, but this is really the beginning. There's a lot of, we all know, those of us who work in this, we know there's a lot of work that needs to be done. What I'd like to know from the panel is, what do you hope to accomplish in your greening initiatives that you have not yet been able to do? And what kind of barriers are you encountering? I know for those of us in the environmental community, we're kind of frustrated that we see so many subsidies going to environmentally harmful activities. The playing field is just not level, which is one of the reasons why we just admire baseball and football, hockey, basketball, tennis's efforts to overcome that bias in the marketplace and still figure out how to find cost-competitive products. Tell us about what you want to accomplish, haven't been able to accomplish, what kind of barriers you're encountering. Bob Nutting?
I think that, again, where we're most pleased is what we've been able to do internally. But the real opportunity that baseball has and the real opportunity that Commissioner Seelig and John McHale have recognized is building that awareness and getting other people moving forward. And so, as you said, the footprint of PNC Park is limited in terms of our actual resource usage, in terms of our actual ability to move our needle internally. We're working very hard to do that appropriately. Where we have an unlimited ability, and everyone on the panel has an unlimited ability to impact, is in using that platform to drive awareness and attention, to, in my case, try to find business-sensitive practices that make environmental sense and also make economic sense, is something that I can then take to, whether it's our corporate partners, whether it's our friends in the business world, to say, this is an economically sustainable practice as well. And I think that as we start to help move the needle, the great opportunity we have going forward, and the frustration is it never goes as fast as you need it to. We try to celebrate the successes as we do, but if we can help be that catalyst, I think that's the long-term win. Just as NRDC and Alan, you were for us to light that spark. If we can help light that spark, 10 more places and then 10 more places, that's where the real impact happens.
Mike Lynch, so other than not being able to get 100% biofuels, what do you want to do that you've not been able to? What kind of barriers do you see in the way of getting you there?
Two quick comments and then a quick answer. In the system, so this is, again, using the platform in order to have real impact in the world. In the United States, moving from 10% ethanol to 15% ethanol in the marketplace, it's simple. It's 1 million jobs will be created as a result. Full stop. That's pretty straightforward. In the world of where we're heading, well, actually, in the ethanol industry, our partner, Growth Energy, Emmitsburg, Iowa, is going to be the epicenter of biofuels next year when they launch the largest cellulosic ethanol plant in the world, making ethanol out of corn cobs and leaves, so waste product. And it's going to be a remarkable story, an American in Iowa. In Tampa, Florida, our most recent new NASCAR Green partner, Creative Recycling Systems. Many of you maybe never heard of them. Private equity funded, venture capital funded company. We spend a lot of time with private equity and venture capital. Mike, we gotta keep in touch actually, because and that's where we're headed now, which has to do with, look, we've got our legs under us in this now. We were patient, we were prudent, we were very careful. The industry was very, very cautious in this whole thing. Pushing the innovation envelope. You're going to hear announcements from us around new technologies that are coming into the sport in basic infrastructure aspects as well as on the competition side, having to do with general innovation in the product and general innovation in support of the sport, and particularly in the area of green and sustainability. Companies that you haven't heard of but are ready for prime time and are great small American companies that have huge potential with brand new technologies. That's where we're heading, is to things that are counterintuitive, new, but also are ready in terms of making business sense and really do work. That's where we're heading.
Mike, what does the NHL want to accomplish? And
I think the frustration comes and the hurdle is just that the entrenched way of doing things is there. There's a lot of inertia, and we have made incredible strides. I mean, as a nation, as a world, and as the sports industry. But we're not really keeping up as much as we want to with a lot of the problems. They're accelerating. So I think the frustration comes in how quickly can you deploy this stuff. And I think what Michael talked about earlier is the absolute key. It's got to be measurable ecologically. I mean, it really has to make an impact. It's got to incorporate people. But performance is the biggest thing. And when you have the U.S. military and you have something as performance-oriented as NASCAR, deploying these technologies, it changes minds, it changes behavior. And that is kind of the key. There's a big mental hurdle that says, this is all great, and it's a feel-good story, but does it really work? If the U.S. military can use it, and someone like NASCAR, it's all about performance. I think that people will buy green products if they're the same price, but they won't buy them if they don't work as well. If your cleaning product doesn't work, or your car doesn't run as fast, or you can't defend your country as well, you just don't use them. And that's the story that I think is the most important one to get out.
If you guys don't mind, if I can just add one quick thing. So Creative Recycling Systems and Sprint. Okay, Sprint has recycled 30 million cell phones in the past 10 years. Okay. National defense and environmental impact, rare earth elements, precious metals, and those materials that are in complex electronic products, that's what Creative Recycling Systems recycles. That's what Sprint puts back in the system. Rare earth elements, if we get them out of our used products, we don't have to import rare earth elements. 85% of rare earth elements in the world come from China now. Now, they're a good partner in that, and it's all good. But You know, the extent to which we can diversify around that, it's the same thing on the ethanol side. Another percentage point here, another percentage point there. It's just like diversifying your retirement portfolio. It's the same deal. And it's something that folks don't know, but in sports, rare earth elements, I mean, can you name them? I mean, the 17 rare earth elements, I can't name them. But what we're going to do is we're going to help our fan base understand why they're important, and they can look up the list. And then it being coming from our country, coming from cell phones that Sprint sells and brings back into reuse, that's a huge deal that is really hard to understand, but we can use our platforms in order to make it understand.
So Creative Recycling is a recycler of electronic waste, e-waste, which is the fastest growing and most contaminated component of the municipal waste stream. The NBA actually at their Orlando All-Star game last year affiliated with Creative and had an e-waste collection program. Much of what's being said can be brought to the other leagues also that are doing this kind of work. We've got representatives of NASCAR and baseball and hockey here, but the NBA and Major League Soccer and the U.S. Tennis Association, they're all doing meaningful work. John, you want to continue?
We got time for one more question. I wanted to open it up to the audience before.
My name's Chris Bradley. I'm with BASF Corporation, and picking up on what Bob was talking about celebrating successes, one of the issues that I've heard from the leadership at sports venues is that while they have successful green initiatives at their venues, they don't always want to promote it externally because they don't want to seem like they're bragging. And I always respond to that, if you don't promote your environmental programs and benefits, who will? And so to the panel, can you talk a little bit about your experiences about overcoming this, and when you're discussing and promoting the programs externally with the public, do you have that concern that you're bragging, and is that keeping you back from doing some of your public relations?
I have not seen too many sports leagues have trouble bragging, or sports players for that matter. I mean, I've got a 10-year-old boy who, you know, he'll brag every time he scores a goal. I think you should be bragging. This is something that needs to get out there, and you have a platform, and you must use it. This is important for national security, for social justice, for the environment, for so many quality of life issues. This is vital. This is very, very important for the future of our society. So this is something, I wouldn't call it bragging. I'd say this is something that we're using best practices, the best practices we know how to deploy right now, and hopefully a year from now another league or another team or another individual uses better practices. You need those bright spots. I mean, how do you change the status quo? Someone's doing something better. Someone's more efficient. Someone's using something that's more creative and therefore better, and they're going to take your market share, then you take it over, and then someone leapfrogs that. So, you know, I hope the NHL has the best program out there, and then Major League Baseball beats it, and then NASCAR beats it, and then we try to beat them. That's what competition is, where we started this conversation. That's why sports is fun to watch. But we have winners and losers, and you know, we all are, for the most part, American in here. We'd like to see our country move in that direction, and in our culture, sports is a huge mover. So that bragging needs to happen.
Well, you know, to be fair, I think we all can come up with examples where there's a little bit of premature bragging that did happen years back. So, in fact, it's all about how you promote and when you promote. And you got to earn that ticket, really. And so, I think the folks here at this table certainly have done that, and more so in the sports world and in the entertainment world, folks have really done that. It's when you get the cart before the horse in this that you really get yourself in a bad spot. And so that's. Fortunately, though, folks have really learned from the experiences that have happened in that, and turned that around, and it's all good. And then, you know, it's interesting, you're from BASF, right? So BASF, do you folks know what BASF does? No, probably not, right? On any specific thing, diversified technology conglomerate, all kinds of hugely impactful products and technologies and solutions in the world, hard to identify. What sports can do is bring those to life. Like really just say, look, you know, here's this BASF technology that makes the world greener, and this thing that helps us deliver this sport product to you. How about that, right? Makes it relevant, ties it right in, and it's real and quantitative. You know, putting green on a jersey, you better have done the work first, right? So.
And I agree completely. I think that picking up on that greenwashing fear, I'm not so sure it's a fear of bragging, because, you know, these two at least didn't hesitate to brag.
That was the word they used. They said we don't want to seem like we're bragging.
In Pittsburgh, we have learned to be humble.
So many reasons.
But in all seriousness, greenwashing is a real challenge, which is why finding the balance of celebrating your successes but being very, very cautious. And again, one advantage we have, and again, you know Brian Welch, publisher of Mother Earth News, real thought leader, extraordinarily high standards. So he can walk around our ballpark and find the 300 things that we're not doing yet that we need to push forward on. We need to find the right balance of, we absolutely have an institutional priority. We absolutely have changed the culture of the organization. We absolutely are going to take it seriously and move forward and use our platform to build awareness. But I think a certain amount of humility, which is hard for sports, saying that we've got to do the work first, and we've got to recognize that there's a lot of work left to be done. And that's the balance that is very hard to find. So again, I think a certain amount of humility, because if you do go out and splash, we're perfect, we finished, immediately you've found the 50 things left along the side where you can be criticized. Celebrating progress, celebrating intent, setting a real priority, those are things that I think really have made a tremendous shift over the last few years. And if there's anything that we can continue to do is recognize great progress has been made in so many areas. Still a lot of work left to be done, but with a clear goal in mind, small steps going forward, eventually we really do change the way people live and think and inhabit this planet. And that's going to make a real difference at the end of the day.
Bob, I think that's a really important point. You know, I started off today talking about leadership by example, and I think what you guys have all done is you've earned the right to not so much brag, but to tell your story. And I think that is really critical in creating the culture change we need here in America to continue to move in a sustainable fashion. I think we've made great strides. You know, I think each of your leagues and each of your sports have done amazing work doing that. I hope this continues going forward. I know that from the White House perspective, the president has talked heavily about this issue and has continued to push the federal government in this direction. Before I close out, I just wanted to give Alan a chance to say anything.
Well, I just want to thank our panelists. Really, you've provided spectacular information and legitimacy to this panel. Really appreciate you being here. Again, thanks to CEQ. I neglected to mention EPA, Stephanie Owens and Lisa and Peter Murphy and Murchie and many others at EPA earlier. So I just want to give a shout out to EPA's great support for this work. And I think we're going to be moving to a panel on the facilities and maybe some PSAs.
We're just going to take a quick 10-minute break, bathroom break, and then we'll be back shortly.
Thanks, folks.